Have you ever found yourself, trying to describe a sound, especially a really complex one, and just grasping for the right words? It often feels like, well, it's kind of whooshy, but also grindy. Yeah, we've all been there, haven't we? Searching for that perfect adjective. But what if there was, like, an entire language? One dedicated to capturing those nuances, and maybe even incredibly precise. Well, today on the Deep Dive, that's exactly what we're going to unpack. We're diving into this really fascinating lexicon that guitarists use, describing the unbelievably nuanced characteristics of sound. And we're pulling directly from the Guitarist lexicon, tone and effect terms.
Right. And our mission really is to give you a shortcut to understanding not just what these terms mean, but why this specialized vocabulary is actually so powerful. It's about gaining a more precise way to talk about sound, finding those aha moments that reveal the surprising depth of sonic expression. You'll start to see how these descriptions, which might seem subjective at first glance, are actually incredibly precise tools. They let musicians communicate really complex ideas, sometimes with just a single word.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this, starting with the foundational elements, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
How do guitarists even begin to describe the basic essence of a sound's frequency balance? Like, what does it really mean when a sound is called bright?
Yeah, that's a great starting point. Foundational. When guitarists talk about a bright sound, they mean there's an emphasis on the higher frequencies. Think of it like turning up the treble control on your stereo.
Okay.
You get something crisp, clear, very cutting sometimes. It really helps a guitar punch through in a mix. And what makes that interesting is how much it contrasts with, say, a dark sound,
Right.
where those high frequencies are reduced, often intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes the sound feel more mellow or muted, maybe even a bit brooding.
That it paints a really clear picture straight away.
Yeah.
So building on that, how do descriptions get more tactile? When I hear someone say a tone is warm, I definitely get a distinct feeling. What does that really convey compared to something described as cold?
That's where it gets really interesting how tactile these become. They're
Yes.
shorthand, right? Imagine a band working on a song saying, we need a warm tone here, that instantly conveys more than just frequency stuff.
Yeah.
It suggests rich, low and low mid frequencies, yeah, but also smooth without harsh highs. There's an emotional quality too. It's just so much more precise than saying make it sound nicer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And conversely, a cold sound really does feel like it's lacking that warmth. It often comes across as thin, maybe a bit clinical, often because it's missing some of those crucial mid-range frequencies.
I can totally feel that difference now you describe it. Okay, and then you have terms like fat versus thin. What's going on in the sound there? What are guitarists hearing?
So fat means the sound is thick, really full-bodied. Often it involves boosted low mids, giving it real weight, real presence. It's a desirable quality, for a big, powerful rhythm guitar sound.
Right.
And that's totally different from a thin sound, which just lacks body, lacks those bass frequencies.
They wouldn't fill things out.
Exactly. A thin sound might really struggle to fill out the mix, or it could sound kind of anemic on its own, like listening through a tiny transistor radio speaker.
Okay, got it. Now here's where it gets really interesting for me. These terms like scooped and mid-forward,
Yeah.
how do they dramatically change a sound's character? What are they actually doing to the frequencies?
Ah, yeah, these are great examples. Really intentional tonal shaping to create a specific vibe. A scooped tone means there's a significant cut, a reduction, in the mid-range frequencies, so the bass and treble get emphasized.
Like a smiley face on an EQ.
Kind of, yeah. Or a U-shape, it's super common in certain genres. Heavy metal, for instance, uses it a lot to get that really aggressive, almost guttural crunch.
Okay.
And mid-forward is basically the opposite, an emphasis on the mid-frequencies. That gives the sound presence, helps it cut through. It really helps a guitar stand out in a busy mix. Often favored for lead guitar or maybe more classic rock tones, it's about crafting an identity for that sound.
So these aren't just like vague feelings people have about the sound. They're actual precise manipulations that musicians use as shorthand to get exactly the sound they're hearing in their head.
Precisely, yeah. They give immediate insight into the sonic fingerprint, you could say, of an instrument or an effect pedal, directing your ear straight to the most prominent characteristics.
Okay, so we've covered the sort of foundational colors of sound. But what about when you want to push things, really push the boundaries? Let's turn up the intensity a bit. Explore how guitarists describe the raw power, the texture of overdrive and distortion, where sounds get their real grit and growl. I mean, everyone knows crunchy, right? That mild to moderate overdrive, it's got a real texture. But what about terms like fizzy, or the one everyone seems to want, creamy?
Ah, yes. Welcome to the world of gain. Crunchy is definitely that satisfying textured breakup. Great for rock rhythm, as you say.
Yeah.
But fizzy, that describes a kind of high-frequency sizzle in the distortion, and it's often seen as undesirable.
Why is that?
Well, it can suggest maybe poor amp settings or sometimes harsh digital artifacts. It's not like a rich natural crunch. And then there's creamy, which is, well, it's just that, a really thick, smooth overdrive, often used for those beautiful singing lead tones where every note just sustains wonderfully.
The idea of a sound being creamy. It just makes sense, doesn't it? You can almost feel the texture. Building on that, what about saturated or compressed? How did those play into the character of distortion?
Good question. We're really talking about how the signal is being driven here. Saturated means the signal is like fully driven, packed with compressed harmonic. It's almost overflowing with sound. That gives it immense sustain and a really dense harmonic richness.
Okay. And compressed?
That's similar but distinct. Compressed describes a squash dynamic range, so you get very consistent loudness. A compressed sound doesn't have the same kind of attack and decay as an uncompressed one. It just sort of sits there in the mix solidly. Then you've got gritty, which implies a raw, maybe unpolished distortion, or breakup things, classic blues rock,
Right.
versus smooth, which is more of an even, polished distortion, no harshness,
Oh.
often preferred for, say, fusion or maybe shred guitar styles.
Now, two terms that really seem to be about control. Flubby versus tight. You hear flubby describing a loose, kind of uncontrolled bass response, especially with high gain, and tight, meaning a really well-controlled low end that's articulate. What does this tell you about the control a player has, and maybe the genre they're playing in?
Exactly right. It is about control. Flubby implies a lack of definition down low. Notes get lost. It becomes a muddy wall of sound sometimes, often a sign of an amp maybe struggling with high gain levels.
Not good for fast riffs, I imagine.
Definitely not. Whereas tight signifies that well-controlled, articulate low end. This is absolutely critical in genres like metal, where you have those fast, palm-muted riffs that need extreme clarity and impact. It's the difference between a really powerful punch and just a messy thud.
It's pretty striking how specific some terms get. Yeah. Like chuggy, you mentioned metal, that tight, palm-muted low-end thump. Or the wonderfully descriptive Velcro-like. That refers to a fuzz tone that cuts off really abruptly, like tearing fabric. It immediately paints such a vivid picture of a very specific sonic texture. You know exactly what that feels like.
Oh, yeah. I actually had a guitarist bring in a fuzz pedal once, and he described it exactly like that, like tearing a strip of Velcro.
Yeah.
Abrasive, sudden, totally unique. That's the power of this language, isn't it? Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, okay, we've talked about how long a note can live once it's struck its sustain.
Yeah.
But just as vital is how that note begins, that very initial burst of sound, its attack. It seems like that has its own rich vocabulary, too. What makes a sound snappy, for instance, or punchy?
Yeah, you're touching on the very initiation of the sound, how it starts. A snappy sound has a quick, really sharp attack, almost like a rapid flick. You hear it often in funk or maybe country picking, where you want that immediate articulation. Punchy implies a strong, dynamic attack. Real impact. It hits you hard and quick, gives a sense of power. Think of maybe a strong chord strum.
Right.
Then you have plucky, which gives you really clear note articulation. The actual string sound is distinct, almost percussive. Compare that to a soft attack, which is much gentler. A gentle initial note sound, rounded transients, often desired for maybe ballads or jazz playing.
Kind of spanky. I hear that one a lot with certain guitars.
It's spanky. Yeah, that's that bright, percussive, clean tone, often heard with single coil pickups like on a classic Stratocaster sound. Very distinctive.
It's amazing, really, how these words help describe not just the sound itself, but also hints about how it's being played, and even the instrument's inherent character. Okay, now let's step into the more ethereal realm, effects and atmosphere. How do guitarists describe something like a shimmery sound or one that's chimey?
Ooh, nice transition. Shimmery refers to that sort of sparkling quality you hear, often used to describe the high-end sheen you get from chorus effect, or maybe a long, bright reverb. It adds this ethereal, almost celestial texture. It floats.
Yeah.
Chimey, on the other hand, describes more of a bell-like clarity. You hear it often in clean tones from specific pickups or amp settings, like little bells ringing. And these aren't just subjective feelings, you know.
Sure.
They're direct results of specific sonic components and effects working together. For instance, glassy often refers to a clear, bright tone, but with a really smooth top end, reminiscent of crystal, maybe.
Smooth highs?
Exactly. Whereas jangly is also bright and chiming, but maybe with more complex harmonics. Think classic 60s pop or those Rickenbacker guitars.
Gotcha. So what does this mean for describing movement in the sound? You hear swirly, which implies a modulation effect with clear movement, or warbly, like a noticeable pitch wobble. And then there's this whole spectrum for ambience, right?
Yeah.
From lush to dreamy to maybe washy. What separates those?
Yes, swirly and warbly immediately tell you there's some kind of modulation going on, like a phaser or maybe a tremolo or vibrato, creating a sonic texture that literally moves and breathes.
Okay.
Then, when we talk about those ambient terms, lush implies a really full, rich ambience or modulation, often from a well-balanced reverb or chorus maybe, makes the sound feel expansive, luxurious.
Nice.
Dreamy suggests something softer, probably reverb-heavy, highly atmospheric, evokes maybe a sense of calm or introspection.
And washy, is that just more reverb?
Well, yes and no. Washy is distinct. While it is heavy on reverb and delay, it usually implies that the actual note definition is reduced. The sound becomes less articulate, more like an indistinct sonic fog or wash. You lose some clarity. So, connecting this back, these terms really let musicians communicate the feeling, the space, even the movement of a sound, not just its core tone. They paint a whole sonic landscape, and with remarkable efficiency.
That makes sense. Beyond the raw sound itself, though, there's how the instrument feels to play, how it reacts to the player. What does it mean for a guitar's sound to be responsive or touch-sensitive? How important are those qualities?
Oh, this really gets into the interaction, the connection between the player and the instrument. It's crucial. A responsive sound reacts well to your picking dynamics, to changes in the guitar's volume knob. Small adjustments in your playing make a noticeable difference in the tone.
So it listens to you.
Exactly. And touch sensitive is similar, maybe even more so. The actual character of the sound changes dramatically depending on how intensely you play. A light touch might stay clean, but digging in harder might produce a gritty breakup or more saturation. These qualities are so important because they let the player express themselves more dynamically. It's almost like the guitar becomes an extension of their hands.
So it's not just about a static sound profile, but how it breathes and changes with your actual playing. In that same vein, what about loose versus stiff in relation to feel? How does that work?
Loose generally describes a less precise, maybe more forgiving response from the amp or guitar. It might be easier to play fast without being perfectly accurate, maybe because the sound blends together a bit more, a bit forgiving. Stiff, on the other hand, indicates that the instrument or perhaps the amplifier requires more effort from the player. It feels less dynamic, gives less pushback maybe, it demands more precision. It's really about how much the sound pushes back at you and how much control is required from your end.
And how do sounds bloom? I love that term. Where a note sort of swells after the initial attack, or becomes sustainy, meaning the notes just ring out for a long, long time. These really describe the life of a note as it unfolds, don't they?
Exactly. Bloom is a beautiful phenomenon. The note isn't just struck and then decays away. It actually seems to grow in volume or maybe harmonic richness after that initial hit, often associated with two amps warming up. And sustainy is simpler, but just as vital. It just means the notes ring out for an incredibly long time. Allows for those long, expressive melodic lines without notes dying out too soon. Together, yeah, these terms capture the whole journey of a note, from its birth to its sort of lingering presence.
Okay, finally, we have these terms that kind of defy easy categorization, but they're incredibly evocative. Things like woody or nasal or maybe boxy. What do these unique descriptors tell us about a sound?
These are wonderful, aren't they? Because they often borrow from other sensory experiences entirely. Woody, for example, implies an almost acoustic-like resonance in the tone, even from an electric guitar, suggests a natural, organic quality.
Interesting.
Nasal describes a prominent mid-range, but with a kind of honky, sometimes irritating character, like someone speaking through their nose. It's often an undesirable frequency spike people try to EQ out.
Right, I can picture that. And boxy.
Boxy sounds, well, boxy. Mid-range heavy and hollow, exactly like the sound is coming out of a small enclosed space, like a cheap speaker cabinet, maybe.
You can instantly picture what they mean. And then the vividness of terms like chewy or throaty. What are they getting at?
Chewy is fantastic. It suggests a thick, textured tone that almost feels tactile, like you could chew on it, often implies a dense, saturated quality that really responds to your touch.
Tactile, yeah.
And throaty evokes a vocal-like mid-range emphasis, where the guitar seems to almost growl or sing with a human-like quality. These are truly sensory descriptions, aren't they? They bypass technical jargon to get straight to the feeling.
Totally. And for the really extreme ends, how about glass breaking? Describing extreme brightness and treble, or sizzly, referring back to that high-frequency distortion fizz. They sound exactly like what they are.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here really is how these terms so often borrow from other senses, taste, touch, even visual imagery. To give you a complete picture of the sound, it really highlights the human tendency, I think, to use rich, descriptive language for complex sensory experiences, even ones that might seem abstract, like sound. It's how we make the invisible audible.
Wow. Okay, so we've taken quite a deep dive into this incredibly rich vocabulary that guitarists use to describe sound, moving way beyond simple adjectives to a language that's precise, evocative, powerful, really.
Absolutely. And this deep dive, it wasn't just about guitar sounds, was it? It's really a powerful example of how humans create specialized language to communicate nuanced sensory experiences. And hopefully it gives you some new tools to listen to and describe the world around you with maybe greater clarity, greater precision, revealing those hidden layers of detail.
Definitely. So for your final provocative thought today, next time you hear a sound you really like, or maybe even one you find grating, can you articulate why? Maybe try using some of these new terms we've discussed, or perhaps even invent your own to truly capture its essence. And think about what other experiences in your life, beyond just sound, might benefit from a more precise, descriptive language.